At 2:14 a.m., the ICU monitors started flatlining one by one. 3 patients died within minutes. But before we could zip the body bags, each of them sat up at the exact same moment and whispered the same thing. "Why did you bring me back? That was 3 weeks ago. I should have quit then. I should have walked out and never looked back. But I'm still here, and now I understand why the turnover rate at St. Dahlia Regional Hospital is so catastrophically high. Some things you can't just walk away from, not when they follow you home." Let me start from the beginning. The job posting appeared on a Thursday afternoon while I was scrolling through employment sites with increasing desperation. Night shift ICU nurse at St. Dahlia Regional Hospital in rural Texas. The pay was obscenely good, nearly double what comparable positions offered. The benefits package included hazard pay, which should have been my first warning. The listing had been posted for 6 months with the urgently hiring tag flashing in red. I applied anyway. My student loans weren't going to pay themselves, and I'd worked plenty of night shifts during my clinicals. How bad could it be? The interview took place over the phone. The HR representative, a woman named Patricia with a voice like gravel and cigarettes, asked me exactly 3 questions. Could I start immediately? Did I have any family in the area? Was I comfortable working alone? When I answered yes, no, and yes respectively, she told me to report Monday at 10 p.m. for orientation. "One more thing," Patricia added before hanging up. "Don't be late. The day shift doesn't stay past 10:15. St. Dahlia Regional Hospital looked exactly like every other forgotten rural medical facility in Texas. A squat concrete building from the 1970s with narrow windows and a parking lot full of potholes. The emergency entrance sign flickered with dying fluorescent tubes. A pickup truck with a shattered taillight sat abandoned near the ambulance bay. Everything about the place whispered that it had been slowly dying for years, kept alive through sheer institutional stubbornness and whatever funding streams small-town hospitals managed to scrape together. The lobby was empty except for a security guard who barely looked up from his phone as I signed in. He slid a visitor badge across the desk without making eye contact. "ICU is 3rd floor. Elevators are broken. Stairs are through there." The stairwell smelled like industrial cleaner and something underneath it, something organic and wrong that the chemicals couldn't quite mask. My footsteps echoed against concrete walls painted the color of old teeth. Somewhere above me, a door slammed shut. Patricia was waiting for me at the 3rd floor nurse's station, exactly as tired and chain-smoking as she'd sounded on the phone. She was perhaps 50, with gray hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful, and eyes that had seen far too much for far too long. "You actually showed up," she said, sounding genuinely surprised. "That's better than the last 4 we hired." She handed me a thick 3-ring binder with a faded label that read ICU Night Protocols in permanent marker. The plastic cover was cracked, and the pages inside had the yellowed quality of documents that had been photocopied too many times. "This is your Bible," Patricia said. 23 rules. You follow them exactly. You'll be fine. You ignore them. You won't last a week. I flipped open the binder. The first rule was printed in all caps. Rule 1. Never question the rules. "I don't understand," I said. Patricia lit a cigarette despite the massive NO smoking signs posted every 10 feet. "You will." She walked me through the ICU layout. 12 beds arranged in a semicircle around the central nurse's station. Each bed had the standard array of monitors, ventilators for poles. Everything looked normal, almost aggressively normal, except for the beds themselves. They were bolted to the floor. "Why are they?" I started. "Rule 8, Patricia interrupted. "Don't ask questions you don't want answered." The other night shift nurse was a woman named Teresa, maybe 30 years old, with dark circles under her eyes and hands that shook slightly when she filled out her charting. She glanced at me when Patricia introduced us, but didn't quite meet my eyes. "Fresh meat," Teresa muttered. "Hope you're better than the last one." "What happened to the last one?" I asked. Neither of them answered. Patricia crushed out her cigarette on the floor and immediately lit another. Day shift leaves at 10:15 sharp, not 10:16. They will leave patients mid-code if they have to. You do not want to be here alone before you understand the rules. I spent the next hour reviewing the protocols while Patricia and Teresa prepared for the shift transition. The rules were bizarre, contradictory, and deeply unsettling. Rule 3 stated that if a patient died between 2:10 and 2:20 a.m., resuscitation should not be initiated regardless of family wishes or DNR status. Rule 7 warned that if a deceased patient began breathing again spontaneously, I should maintain a distance of at least 6 feet until the breathing stabilized. Rule 13 was even stranger. Never treat a patient who wakes up asking for a doctor named Dr. Crow. There is no Dr. Crow, but it was Rule 18 that made my stomach turn. Bodies that sit up on their own must be placed in isolation ward C. Do not make eye contact. Do not respond to anything they say. Is this a joke? I asked, looking up from the binder. Patricia exhaled smoke through her nose. Do I look like I'm joking? At 10:14 p.m., the day shift nurses vanished like roaches when the lights turn on. One moment they were charting, the next they were gone. The sound of their footsteps retreating down the stairwell echoed through the empty hallway. Teresa watched them go with an expression I couldn't quite read. Relief mixed with something like resignation. So it's just us? I asked. Until 6 a.m., Teresa confirmed. She pulled out her own copy of the protocol binder, pages dog-eared and stained. Stay close to me tonight. Watch what I do. Don't improvise. We had 8 patients. Most were elderly, post-operative, or in various stages of organ failure. Standard ICU cases. Bed 6 was occupied by an elderly man named Harold Peterson, post-stroke, unresponsive, on a ventilator. His chart indicated he'd been in a vegetative state for 11 days. He's been trying to die since Friday, Teresa said quietly, checking his vitals. They keep bringing him back. Who keeps bringing him back? She didn't answer. Instead, she handed me a modified code card. It looked normal except for the additional equipment strapped to the side. Restraints, a syringe filled with something that definitely wasn't epinephrine, and a handheld radio set to a frequency labeled emergency only. If something happens, you call that frequency and you run, Teresa said. Don't be a hero. Don't try to help. Just run. What kind of something? You'll know it when you see it. The first few hours passed uneventfully. I did my rounds, checked vitals, adjusted medications, documented everything in meticulous detail. The ICU was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the mechanical sigh of ventilators. Normal hospital sounds, comforting in their monotony. At 1:47 a.m., I was updating Mr. Peterson's chart when I noticed Teresa standing at the nurse's station, staring at the clock on the wall. Her jaw was clenched, and she was gripping her pen so tightly her knuckles had gone white. What's wrong? I asked. It's almost time, she whispered. Time for what? She pointed at Rule 3 in my binder. The window. 2:10 to 2:20. That's when it usually happens. When what usually happens? Before she could answer, the monitor for bed 6 began alarming. Mr. Peterson's heart rate had dropped to 30 beats per minute and was still falling. Teresa moved toward his bed with the slow, reluctant gait of someone approaching a crime scene. I followed, my training kicking in automatically. Decreased heart rate, blood pressure dropping, oxygen saturation plummeting. He was coding. We needed to start resuscitation immediately. I reached for the code button. Don't, Teresa said sharply. Check the time. The clock on the wall read to 11 a.m. We can't just let him die, I protested. Rule 3, she repeated. Between 2:10 and 2:20, we do nothing. Mr. Peterson's heart rate hit 0. The monitor flatlined with that long, endless tone that every medical professional knows too well. I stood there, paralyzed between my training and these insane protocols, watching a man die while I did absolutely nothing. Teresa didn't move. She just watched the clock. 2:12 a.m. The flatline continued. Mr. Peterson was clinically dead. His chest was still, his pupils fixed and dilated. Standard death. Nothing unusual. Then at 2:13 a.m., exactly 3 minutes after his heart stopped, Harold Peterson's eyes opened. Not the slow flutter of someone regaining consciousness. His eyelids snapped open like window blinds, revealing eyes that were milky white with no visible pupils. His jaw dropped open, and a sound emerged from his throat. Not quite a moan, not quite words, but something in between that made every hair on my body stand straight up. "Don't approach," Teresa hissed, grabbing my arm. Rule 7. 6 feet minimum. Mr. Peterson's chest began rising and falling with shallow, mechanical breaths. The ventilator tube was still in place, but he was breathing around it, his chest moving in a rhythm that didn't match the machine's program cycles. His fingers twitched, then curled into fists. "This is impossible," I whispered. "He's brain dead. There's no way." Mr. Peterson's head turned toward me with a grinding, clicking sound like rusty gears. Those milk-white eyes fixed on me, seeing me despite having no functional pupils, and his mouth opened wider. The sound that came out was horrible, a wet, gurgling approximation of speech that might have been words if words could be drowned in seawater and dragged back up. But I understood it anyway. "Why did you bring me back?" Then he began humming. A lullaby, something I recognized from childhood but couldn't name. The tune was off-key, wrong, like someone humming from inside a well. Teresa was already moving, pulling the protocol binder open to Rule 18. "We need to get him to Isolation Ward C. Help me with the bed. He's still connected to." "Leave it. Everything stays attached." We moved the whole bed. We unlocked the bed's wheels. They moved despite being bolted down, some kind of release mechanism I hadn't noticed, and started pushing Mr. Peterson toward a hallway I hadn't been shown during orientation. His humming continued, that awful off-key lullaby, and his milky eyes tracked our movement the entire time. Isolation Ward C was at the end of a hallway that felt too long, too narrow, too cold. The door was heavy steel with a small reinforced window. Teresa punched a code into the keypad, 666010, and the lock clicked open with a sound like breaking bones. Inside, I could see other beds, other patients, all sitting upright, all humming the same lullaby. We pushed Mr. Peterson's bed inside. The moment we crossed the threshold, he stopped humming and lay back down. His eyes closed. The spontaneous breathing ceased. The monitor showed a flat line again. Teresa pulled me out quickly and sealed the door behind us. "What the hell was that?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "What is this place? What's happening to these patients?" She leaned against the wall, exhausted. "That's the job. That's why they pay so much. That's why nobody stays. But how is it possible? How could someone be dead and then just—" "Rule 1. Teresa interrupted. "Never question the rules. You want to survive here? Stop asking how. Just accept what is." We walked back to the nurse's station in silence. My hands were trembling. My mind was racing through everything I'd learned in nursing school. Every physiological principle I understood about death and dying, trying to find some rational explanation for what I'd just witnessed. There wasn't one. At 2:19 a.m., another monitor began alarming. Bed 9, an elderly woman named Agnes who'd been admitted for pneumonia. Her heart rate was dropping fast. "Not again," I whispered. Teresa checked the clock. 2:19 a.m., still within the window. We watched Agnes die. We watched her flatline. And at 2:22 a.m., 3 minutes after death, her eyes opened, milky white, pupils gone, and she began humming that same horrible lullaby. "Why does it keep happening?" I asked as we prepared to move her to Isolation Ward C. Teresa glanced at me, and for the first time, I saw a real fear in her eyes. "Because someone keeps calling them back," she said quietly, "and we still don't know who." The next night, I arrive at 9:45 p.m. with a thermos of coffee and a determination to treat this like any other nursing job. Teresa had said not to question things, but questions were all I had. Questions and a memory of milky white eyes tracking my movement across a dark room. Patricia was smoking by the stairwell entrance when I arrived. She looked at me with something resembling approval. "You came back. That's more than I expected. The pay is good," I said, though that wasn't entirely true. The money was excellent, but that wasn't why I'd returned. I needed to understand what was happening here. My entire medical education had been built on observable, testable phenomena. What I'd witnessed last night shattered every principle I'd been taught about the line between life and death. "Just remember," Patricia said, exhaling smoke into the humid Texas night, "curiosity in this place doesn't kill cats. It kills nurses who ask too many questions about things they're better off not knowing." Teresa was already at the nurse's station when I arrived, reviewing charts with that same exhausted focus. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept during the day. She acknowledged me with a slight nod. 6 patients tonight," she said. 3 post-operative, 2 cardiac, 1 trauma. Beds 2, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 12. "What about bed 6? I asked, remembering Harold Peterson. "Still in isolation ward C. They don't come back out." She said it matter-of-factly, as if this were normal hospital procedure. "Once they cross over during the window, they stay there." "For how long?" "Until they're finally released." She wouldn't elaborate on what that meant. I spent the first hour of my shift doing normal nursing tasks, checking vitals, administering medications, updating charts. Everything was routine, almost aggressively mundane, as if the hospital were trying to pretend last night hadn't happened. But I kept glancing at the clock, watching the minutes crawl toward 2:10 a.m. At 1:30 a.m., I decided to review the protocol binder more carefully. In the harsh fluorescent light of the nurse's station, I read through all 23 rules, making notes, trying to find patterns. Several rules mentioned specific times. Rule 3 prohibited resuscitation between 2:10 and 2:20 a.m. Rule 9 warned against checking on isolation ward C between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. Rule 14 stated that if any equipment failed at exactly 2:12 a.m., it should be replaced immediately without attempting to repair it. Everything centered on that 10-minute window. Something about those specific minutes made death behave differently here. Rule 19 caught my attention. If a revived patient stares at their original body, restrain them immediately. I read it 3 times, trying to parse the implication. How could a patient stare at their own body? Unless. "Teresa," I called across the station. "Rule 19. What does it mean by original body?" She didn't look up from her charting. "Exactly what it says. But that doesn't make sense. How can someone be separate from there?" "Rule 1. She interrupted. "Stop questioning." At 2:04 a.m., the monitors for bed 7 began showing irregularities. The patient, a 53-year-old man named David Chun recovering from cardiac surgery, was showing elevated heart rate and blood pressure. Not critical, but concerning. I walked over to check on him. Mr. Chun was awake, which was unusual for this time of night. Most ICU patients were heavily sedated. His eyes tracked my approach with perfect clarity. "Good morning, Mr. Chun," I said automatically, checking his vitals manually. "How are you feeling?" "I died," he said. His voice was calm, conversational. 3 hours ago, I felt my heart stop, felt myself leave. I checked his chart. No cardiac events recorded tonight. His surgery had been 2 days ago, and recovery had been unremarkable. "You're confused," I said gently. "That's normal after surgery. The anesthesia can cause." "I'm not confused." He looked directly at me, and his eyes were completely lucid. "I died at 11:27 p.m. in the operating room." I floated above the table and watched them work on me. Dr. Patterson said, "We're losing him." The nurse, older woman, gray hair, said, "Should we call it?" But then something pulled me back, yanked me back into my body, so hard it hurt. My skin prickled. "Mr. Chun, I need you to stay calm." "Did I die right this time?" he asked. The question was eerily similar to what the patients last night had whispered. Or will they call me back again? I glanced at the clock. 2:08 a.m. "Teresa," I called, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need you." She appeared beside me, so quickly and quietly that I jumped. She looked at Mr. Chun, then at the clock, and her expression hardened. "Get the restraints," she said quietly. "Soft restraints, not the leather ones. We have 2 minutes. 2 minutes until what?" "Until he codes. He's stable. His vitals are. Trust me. Get the restraints." I retrieved the soft wrist restraints from the supply cabinet, my hands shaking. This was insane. You didn't restrain stable patients. It was unethical, possibly illegal. But I'd learned last night that normal rules didn't apply here. At 2:10 a.m., David Chin's heart rate spiked to 180 beats per minute. At 2:11 a.m., it dropped to 0. The monitor flatlined. Teresa and I stood there, following Rule 3, doing nothing while a man died right in front of us. Mr. Chin's last expression was one of relief, as if he'd been waiting for this moment, welcoming it. 3 minutes. We waited 3 minutes while the flatline tone screamed through the ICU. At 2:14 a.m., David Chin's eyes opened. Milky white. No pupils. But this time was different. His mouth didn't open. He didn't hum. Instead, he turned his head slowly to the left, looking at something beside his bed. His expression shifted to confusion, then horror. I followed his gaze and saw nothing. Empty space beside the bed. "No, no, no," Teresa whispered, frantically flipping through the protocol binder. "Rule 19. He's looking at it." "Looking at what?" I demanded. "There's nothing there. We can't see it, but he can. He's looking at his body, his original body." Her hands were shaking as she found the page. "It means he didn't fully return. Part of him is still dead, still beside the bed, and the part that came back can see it." Mr. Chun started screaming, a sound of pure existential terror that made every patient in the ICU stir. His restrained hands clawed at the air beside his bed, trying to reach something we couldn't see. "Make it stop," he shrieked. "Make it stop looking at me. It's me, but it's not me, and it won't stop staring." Teresa grabbed the syringe from the emergency kit, the one filled with unknown medication. She injected it directly into his foreline. Within seconds, Mr. Chin went limp, unconscious but still breathing. "What was that?" I asked. "Something that helps them sleep when they shouldn't be awake." She was pale, breathing hard. "We need to check the security footage. Right now." "What?" "Because if he can see his original body, the cameras might be able to capture it too." The security office was on the first floor, manned by the same disinterested guard from my first night. He barely looked up when Teresa demanded to see the ICU footage from the past hour. He slid a tablet across the desk without comment. Teresa pulled up the camera feed for bed 7, rewound at 2:14 a.m., and pressed play. I watched myself and Teresa standing beside Mr. Chen's bed. The timestamp showed 2 hours, 14 minutes, and 7 seconds when his eyes opened. But on the camera feed, there was something else in the frame. Something that made my blood turn to ice water. Beside the bed, barely visible, was a translucent figure. It looked like David Chun. Same face, same body, but faded like an underexposed photograph. This second, Chun stood perfectly still, staring down at the Chun in the bed with an expression of infinite sadness. As we watched, the Chun in the bed turned his head toward the translucent figure. That's when he started screaming. "Oh my God," I whispered. Teresa zoomed in on the translucent figure. Its mouth was moving, forming words we couldn't hear. I managed to read its lips. "Why did you bring me back?" "It happens sometimes," Teresa said quietly. "When they come back during the window, they don't always come back completely. Part of them stays dead, trapped in that moment of death. and they have to exist alongside their revived body. She closed the tablet. That's why Rule 19 requires immediate restraints. If the revived version manages to touch the dead version, both collapse. We lose them permanently. How do you know all this? Because I've been working here for 3 years. I've seen it happen 12 times. She stood up, heading back toward the stairs. And every single time, they beg us to let them touch. To let both versions collapse so they can finally be at peace. Then why don't we let them? She stopped on the stairwell, looking back at me with exhausted eyes. Because of Rule 23. But you're not ready to know about that one yet. We returned to the ICU to find chaos. 2 more patients had coded, beds 5 and 11. Both during the window. Both following the pattern. Both now lying in their beds with milky white eyes open, breathing spontaneously around their ventilator tubes, humming that same horrible lullaby. But there was something new, something the protocol binder hadn't mentioned. They were humming in harmony. Bed 5, an elderly woman named Patricia Rodriguez. Bed 11, a middle-aged man named Thomas Walsh. Different patients, different medical histories, no connection to each other. But they were humming the same lullaby in perfect 2-part harmony, their white eyes tracking in synchronized movements. That's new, Teresa said, and I heard actual fear in her voice. They've never coordinated before. As we prepare to move both patients to isolation ward C, Patricia Rodriguez's humming stopped abruptly. Her head turned toward me with that grinding, mechanical sound, and her mouth opened wider than should have been anatomically possible. A voice emerged, not her elderly woman's voice, but something deeper, masculine, almost familiar, and it formed words with terrible clarity. Tell them, Dr. Crow is waiting. Teresa dropped her into the bed. No, that's not supposed to happen yet. It's too early for that name. What name? Who's Dr. Crow? I demanded. But before she could answer, every monitor in the ICU began alarming simultaneously. Not just the patients who'd coded, all 6 patients. Every screen flickered with the same error message repeated over and over. Lazarus protocol active, Lazarus protocol active, Lazarus protocol active. The lights overhead began flickering in rhythm with the alarms. And from isolation ward C, down that too long hallway with the steel door, I heard something that made my skin crawl. Dozens of voices, humming that lullaby in perfect harmony. Dozens of patients who died and been called back, all singing together like a chorus of the damned. At the nurse's station, the ancient computer monitor turned on by itself. Text appeared on the screen, typing itself letter by letter. He needs more. The window is opening wider. Soon it will stay open forever. Teresa grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in painfully. We need to call the emergency line. Right now. I fumbled for the radio with the emergency-only frequency. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely press the button. This is ICU night shift. I don't know what we have. Multiple patients exhibiting Rule 19 behaviors. Something about Dr. Crow. The monitors are. Static erupted from the radio, then a voice. Not Patricia, not anyone from the hospital. A man's voice, cultured and calm. There is no emergency. This is the expected progression. Continue standard protocols. Do not be alarmed. Dr. Crow is simply eager to meet you both. The radio went dead. In bed 7, Davidson suddenly sat bolt upright despite the sedative. His eyes were still milky white, but tears were streaming down his face. He looked at me desperately, his mouth forming words that came out wrong, layered with multiple voices. Run. Before. He chooses. You. Then he reached out toward the invisible figure beside his bed, his original body, his trapped dead self. And before Teresa could stop him, his fingers made contact with empty air. Both David chins vanished. The one in the bed simply ceased to exist, disappearing like smoke. and the spot where the translucent figure had stood went suddenly cold. The monitor flatlined with a finality that felt different from before. "He's gone," Teresa whispered. "Really gone." Both versions collapsed together. She checked his bed quickly, then grabbed my hand with desperate strength. "Listen to me very carefully. Whatever happens tonight, whatever you see, don't let anything touch your original body. Because once the dead part of you is visible, that means they're already trying to split your consciousness." Who is they? Who's Dr. Crow? A man who was supposed to save lives but learned how to trap death instead. She pulled me toward the protocol binder, flipping to Rule 13. He doesn't exist anymore. Not physically, but his machine is still running, somewhere in this hospital, still doing what he designed it to do. What machine? She opened her mouth to answer, but every light in the ICU went dark. Emergency power kicked in with that sickly red glow, and in that crimson darkness, I heard the steel door to Isolation Ward C creak open. The humming grew louder. Footsteps in the hallway. Multiple pairs. Shuffling, dragging wrong. And underneath it all, barely audible, the sound of machinery. Something massive, something old, humming to life with a rhythm that matched the lullaby. Teresa's face in the red emergency light looked like a skull. That machine just activated on its own. That means Rule 22 is now in effect. I frantically flipped to Rule 22 in the protocol binder. If the Lazarus trigger activates on its own, lock all ICU doors and evacuate immediately. Do not look back. Do not listen to anyone calling your name. Run. The footsteps were getting closer. The humming was coming from the hallway now, not just from the patients. And somewhere in the darkness, I heard a man's voice. Calm, professional, eerily friendly. "Why are you running?" "I've been so eager to meet my new nurses. We have so much work to do together." Teresa grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the emergency stairs. But as we ran, I glanced back one time, just once. In the doorway to Isolation Ward C, I saw them. Dozens of patients, standing in perfect formation, their milky white eyes glowing in the darkness. And in front of them, I saw something that couldn't be real. A translucent figure in a doctor's coat, old-fashioned, from decades past. He was smiling, and when he saw me looking, he raised one finger to his lips in a shushing gesture. Then he pointed directly at me. I ran. I didn't go home after my shift ended. I drove to a 24-hour diner 30 miles from the hospital and sat in a booth until sunrise, drinking coffee and staring at my hands, trying to convince myself that the trembling would eventually stop. It didn't. Teresa had refused to talk during our drive down those emergency stairs, through the empty lobby, past the security guard who wouldn't meet our eyes. She'd only spoken once we reached the parking lot, her face illuminated by the flickering ambulance bay lights. "You saw him, didn't you?" "Crow." I nodded. "Then you mark now. He knows your face. He'll be watching for you." She climbed into her car, paused with the door open. "If you're smart, you won't come back tonight. But I know you will. Because once he marks you, you can't stop thinking about it. You need to understand. That's how he gets his hooks in." She was right. I spent the entire day researching, driven by a compulsion I couldn't quite name. I needed to know what was happening at St. Dahlia Regional Hospital. I needed to understand who, or what, Dr. Crow had been. The hospital's official website was useless, full of generic stock photos and platitudes about comprehensive care and healing the community. But local newspaper archives were more revealing. I found references to St. Dahlia Regional going back decades, including a troubling gap in coverage between 1978 and 1983. No news stories about the hospital during those 5 years. Nothing. As if the entire facility had been redacted from public record. I expanded my search. Medical journals, university archives, government databases that required creative use of my nursing credentials to access. Finally, on a scanned microfiche from a medical conference in 1977, I found him, Dr. Elias Crow, cardiothoracic surgeon and researcher, graduate of Johns Hopkins, decorated military physician, pioneer in resuscitation techniques. The photograph showed a man in his early 50s with sharp features and eyes that seemed too intense, too focused, like someone staring at something just beyond the camera's frame. The article was about his controversial research into consciousness preservation during clinical death. Dr. Crow theorized that human consciousness didn't immediately dissipate when the heart stopped. Instead, it lingered in a liminal state for approximately 6 to 9 minutes, the same window the brain could survive without oxygen. He believed that with the right technology, consciousness could be captured during that window and forcibly reintegrated with the body, effectively reversing death. His peers called it pseudoscience. The Medical Ethics Board called it dangerous. The military, according to heavily redacted documents I found in a Defense Department archive, called it Project Lazarus. In 1978, Dr. Elias Crow was appointed chief of surgery at St. Dahlia Regional Hospital in rural Texas. The hospital had been struggling financially and accepted a substantial grant from a defense contractor to build a specialized cardiac research unit. Construction was completed in early 1979. Then the newspaper coverage stopped. I found one more reference, buried in a 1983 article about hospital accreditation issues. A single paragraph mentioned that St. Dahlia Regional Hospital had been temporarily closed for equipment safety violations, and that the chief of surgery, Dr. Elias Crow, had disappeared under circumstances still under investigation. No body was ever found. No charges were filed. The hospital reopened 6 months later with a new staff and a sealed basement level that wasn't mentioned in any official floor plans. I arrived for my shift that night armed with questions and a growing sense that I was walking into something far worse than I'd imagined. Patricia was waiting at the entrance, smoking 3 cigarettes at once. "You look like hell," she said. "I've been researching Dr. Crow." She went very still. "Then you're stupider than I thought. I need to know what happened. I need to understand what he created." Patricia crushed out all 3 cigarettes against the brick wall. What he created is still running. Somewhere in the sub-basement, in a room that's not on any map, there's a machine. The Lazarus trigger. Crow built it to capture consciousness at the moment of death and force it back into the body. It worked. Too well. But consciousness isn't meant to be recalled like that. It comes back wrong, fractured, and the machine doesn't know when to stop trying. So the patients who die during the window, the machine catches them, drags them back, sometimes completely, sometimes only partially. That's why they come back with milky eyes and wrong voices. They're not fully human anymore. They're whatever Crow turned people into when he learned how to trap death itself. She lit another cigarette with shaking hands. The window used to be smaller, just a few minutes, but it's been growing, getting wider. Soon it'll be open all the time, and every person who dies in this hospital will come back wrong. Why don't they shut it down? Destroy the machine? Patricia laughed bitterly. Because nobody knows how. Crow disappeared before he could document his work. The machine runs on its own power source, some kind of self-sustaining system he designed. We can't find it to destroy it. We've tried. Every few years, someone tries. They never come back up from the sub-basement. What happened to Crow? Where did he go? She looked at me with hollow eyes. Where do you think? He tested the machine on himself, triggered his own death and resurrection during the window. But something went wrong. His consciousness got trapped in the machine circuits. Now he exists in that liminal space between life and death. And he uses the revived patients like puppets. That's who speaks through them. That's who's been watching you. My skin crawled. He's dead but not dead. He's what the machine makes everyone who passes through it. Stuck. Unable to fully live. Unable to fully die. And he's been alone down there for 45 years, with nothing but that machine and the consciousnesses it captures. Patricia dropped her cigarette. Rule 23 explains why we can't let the patients escape. Want to know what it says? I nodded, unable to speak. Rule 23. If Dr. Crow manifests physically through a host body, destroy the Lazarus trigger immediately. Do not hesitate, because if he gets a permanent host, he can leave the machine behind and walk free. A host body, I repeated slowly, he's trying to possess someone. Not just anyone. It has to be someone who works closely with death. Someone whose consciousness is already attuned to that liminal space. Someone like a night shift ICU nurse. I finished. Patricia nodded. That's why the turnover is so high. That's why we go through nurses so quickly. Crow marks the ones he wants, and they either quit or... She trailed off. Or what? Or they go down to the sub-basement one night, trying to destroy the machine, and they never come back up. We find their bodies eventually, empty, like someone scooped out everything that made them human and left behind just meat. I thought about the translucent figure I'd seen in the doorway, pointing at me, marking me. I need to see the machine, I said. Absolutely not. That's suicide. If the window is getting wider, if Crow is getting stronger, then eventually he'll break out anyway. We need to know what we're dealing with. We need to find a way to stop it before he chooses his host and leaves. Patricia interrupted. Before he walks out of here wearing someone else's face and continues his work somewhere else. Somewhere with more patients, more deaths to harvest. She studied me for a long moment, then sighed. There's an access point. Old service elevator behind the morgue. Goes down to the sub-basement. But you need a key, and the only keys are held by administration. Where's administration? Dead. All of them. They were the first ones Crow took when he started getting strong enough to manifest physically. He's been running this hospital through the night shift staff for years, keeping it operational just enough to maintain a steady supply of dying patients. She pulled out a key card from inside her shirt, hanging on a chain. I took this off the last administrator's body. I've been too afraid to use it. Give it to me. You'll die down there. I'll die up here if I don't try. You said it yourself. He's marked me, which means I'm running out of time. Patricia removed the key card and pressed it into my palm. It was warm from her body heat and stained with something brown that might have been old blood. The elevator is behind the morgue. You'll need to go during the window between 2:12 and 2:17 because that's when the machine is most active and the door will unlock. You'll have 5 minutes to get down there, see what you can see, and get back out. If you're still down there when the window closes, she didn't finish. What's down there besides the machine? The archive. Crow's original research notes. Patient files from the first trials. And the bodies of everyone who tried to stop him. She squeezed my hand around the key card. If you find something useful, something that tells us how to destroy the Lazarus trigger, you run. You don't try to destroy it yourself. You come back up and we call in experts. Understand? I nodded, though I knew I was lying. If I found the machine, if I found a way to stop it, I wasn't going to wait. I couldn't. Not with Crow's attention fixed on me. Not with his consciousness reaching out through every revived patient, trying to find a permanent home. The shift started normally enough. For patients tonight, post-operative cases, stable conditions. Teresa was quiet, withdrawn, barely speaking as we did our rounds. She kept glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Fear, maybe, or pity. At 1:45 a.m., I excused myself to use the restroom and instead headed toward the morgue. St. Dahlia Regional's morgue was exactly what you'd expect. Cold, sterile, filled with the chemical smell of formaldehyde and the underlying sweetness of decay. The refrigerated drawers lined one wall. Most were empty. A few held bodies waiting for transport or autopsy. I found the service elevator exactly where Patricia said it would be, hidden behind a maintenance closet door. The elevator itself looked ancient, probably original to the building, with an accordion gate and brass controls worn smooth by decades of use. The card reader beside the call button was new, though modern security grafted onto old infrastructure. I checked my watch. 2:07 a.m. 5 minutes until the window opened. While I waited, I examined the morgue more carefully. One of the refrigerated drawers was labeled with today's date and a name I recognized, David Shun, the patient from last night who'd touched his original body and vanished. I opened the drawer. It was empty. Not empty as in someone had removed the body. Empty as in there had never been a body. The drawer was pristine and used, yet the label clearly indicated a death had occurred and a body should be present. I opened other drawers. More names I recognized from previous nights. All empty. They're not really dead. A voice said behind me. I spun around. Teresa stood in the morgue entrance, her expression unreadable. "What are you doing here?" I demanded. "Stopping you from making a terrible mistake." She stepped closer. The bodies disappear because they're not bodies anymore. Their consciousnesses trapped in the machine. Crow doesn't let them go. He keeps them, uses them as processing power for the Lazarus trigger. Every person who dies during the window becomes part of the machine. How do you know all this? Because I went down there 2 years ago. I made it back, but I didn't come back alone. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing her forearm. In the harsh morgue lighting, I could see something moving beneath her skin, dark threads that writhed like living wires, spreading from her wrist toward her elbow. The machine touched me, put part of itself inside me. Now I can feel everyone trapped down there. I can hear them screaming. My watch showed 2:11 a.m. "I have to try," I said. "If there's any chance of stopping this." There isn't. Crow is too strong now. The only way to stop the Lazarus trigger is to give it what it wants, which is a perfect host, someone who enters the machine willingly, someone who can merge completely with Crow's consciousness and then shut it down from the inside. She looked at me with infinite sadness. That's what he's been waiting for. That's why he marks certain nurses. He's looking for someone strong enough to contain both consciousnesses without shattering. And you think that's me. I know it is. I can feel his attention on you. It's different than how he looked at the others. He thinks you're the one. The elevator suddenly hummed to life. The card reader flashed green. 2:12 a.m. exactly. The window was open. "Don't go down there," Teresa pleaded. "If you go, you'll never come back as yourself. Either Crow will take you, or you'll see something that breaks your mind, or—" I swiped the card. The elevator gate clanked open with the sound of breaking bones. Inside, the elevator car was illuminated by a single flickering bulb. The walls were covered in scratched messages, thousands of them, written in various hands over many years. "Turn back, he's waiting, I can hear them screaming, don't let him," and Crow never left. And at the bottom, freshly carved, in handwriting I somehow recognized as my own, even though I'd never written it. "Welcome home." I stepped inside. The gate closed behind me with a sound like teeth snapping shut. There was only one button, B2, for sub-basement level 2. I pressed it. The elevator descended with agonizing slowness, creaking and groaning, the lights flickering in rhythm with that horrible lullaby I'd heard the revived patients humming. As we dropped deeper, I felt the temperature plummet. My breath fogged in the air. The numbers above the door counted down. G, B1, B2. But the elevator didn't stop at B2. It kept going. B3, B4, B5. The elevator shaft apparently went much deeper than any official blueprint showed. How far down had Crow built his laboratory? Finally, at B7, the elevator shuddered to a stop. The gate opened onto absolute darkness. I pulled out my phone and activated the flashlight. The beam cut through the blackness, revealing a corridor that shouldn't exist. The walls were covered in thousands of handprints, all pointing in the same direction, like a grotesque trail of breadcrumbs left by everyone who'd come before me. I followed the handprints. The corridor ended at a massive steel door with a biometric scanner. Before I could figure out how to bypass it, the scanner flashed green and the door swung open on its own. Something was inviting me in. The room beyond was enormous, stretching far beyond what my phone's light could illuminate. But I could see enough. Hospital beds arranged in concentric circles, maybe 100 of them, each occupied by a body connected to an elaborate network of wires and tubes that all fed into a central apparatus. The Lazarus trigger. It was massive, cobbled together from equipment spanning decades. 1970s computers with reel-to-reel tape drives, modern medical monitors, strange homemade components that looked almost organic. The entire thing pulsed with a sickly blue-green light that made my eyes hurt to look at directly. And it was humming, that same lullaby, but now I could hear the words. Hush, little baby. Don't say a word. Papa's going to catch you a mockingbird. The bodies in the beds weren't moving, but I could see their chests rising and falling in perfect synchronization with the machine's rhythm. Some of them I recognized, patients from recent nights, people who died and been revived and moved to isolation ward C. Others were ancient, mummified, clearly dead for years, but somehow still connected to the machine. They were all humming. In the center of the room, directly in front of the Lazarus trigger, stood a hospital bed that was empty, waiting. Hello, a voice said, not from any speaker, from everywhere at once, vibrating in my bones. I've been so eager to meet you properly. A figure materialized beside the empty bed. Dr. Elias Crow, no longer translucent but almost solid, wearing a blood-stained surgical gown from decades past. His eyes were the same milky white as the revived patients, but behind them I could see something moving. Thousands of consciousnesses trapped and merged, all speaking through one mouth. You're more perceptive than the others, Crow said, his voice layered with countless others. They came down here with fear or anger or desperation, but you came with curiosity, understanding. You want to know how it works, don't you? I did. God help me, I did. Crow smiled, and I saw that his teeth were too numerous, overlapping like multiple mouths occupying the same space. The Lazarus trigger captures consciousness at the moment of death, that perfect instant when the mind knows it's dying but hasn't quite let go. That moment contains everything a person is, concentrated and pure. I learned how to bottle that moment, keep it, and when I force it back into the body, it's changed, improved, made aware of what lies beyond death. Why? My voice came out as a whisper. Why would you do this? Because I died, Crow said simply, in 1962, in a field hospital in Vietnam. Technically dead for 8 minutes before they brought me back. And in those 8 minutes, I saw something. I understood something. Death isn't an ending. It's a transformation into something magnificent and terrible. But we're not meant to remember it. The body suppresses the memory, hides it away. I spent years trying to recall what I'd seen, what I'd understood, and I couldn't. His expression twisted with frustration. So I built this machine to capture that moment, to study it, to let people see what I'd seen. But it went wrong. It went perfectly, he corrected. I triggered my own death in 1982, right here in this room. Let my heart stop. Felt my consciousness separate from my body. And the Lazarus trigger caught me, just as I designed. But instead of pulling me back into my body, it pulled me into itself. I became part of the machine. And from here, I could finally see everything I glimpsed during those 8 minutes in Vietnam. All of death's secrets, laid bare. Then why do you need a host? Why try to escape? Crow's smile faded. Because seeing isn't enough anymore. I want to continue my work. Expand it. There are other hospitals, other patients, other consciousnesses waiting to be captured and studied. But I'm trapped here, bound to this machine, unable to leave unless I can merge with someone living. Someone whose consciousness is strong enough to contain me without shattering. He gestured to the bodies in the beds. These are my failures. People who try to stop me, or people I try to merge with. All of them broke. Their minds couldn't handle sharing space with mine. But you. He moved closer, impossibly fast. You're different. I can feel it. Your consciousness is already halfway between life and death. You work in that space every night, watching people die, holding that boundary. You're perfect. I won't let you possess me. I'm not asking permission. Crow pointed to the empty bed. That bed is linked directly to the Lazarus Trigger's core system. If you lie down voluntarily, the merge will be clean, painless. We'll become one consciousness. Your body, my knowledge. Together, we can revolutionize medicine. Show the world what death truly means. And if I refuse? The humming from the bodies grew louder. Hundreds of voices, all harmonizing. Then I'll do it by force. It won't be painless. Your consciousness will shatter into pieces, and I'll have to reconstruct you from fragments. You'll still be my host, but you won't be you anymore. I looked at the empty bed, then at the Lazarus Trigger, its pulsing lights reflected in thousands of dead eyes. I thought about Teresa's words. The only way to stop it is to give it what it wants. To merge with Crow from the inside and to shut him down. But I also remembered what she'd shown me. The dark threads moving beneath her skin. The machine didn't let go. Once it touched you, you were part of it forever. My watch showed 2:16 a.m. 1 minute until the window closed. I made my decision. I grabbed a fire extinguisher from a wall and swung it with all my strength at the nearest component of the Lazarus Trigger. One of the old reel-to-reel computers that seemed to be routing power to the other systems. The impact sent sparks flying. Alarms immediately started screaming. The lights flickered wildly. No. Crow's voice turned monstrous, layered with the screams of thousands. You'll destroy them all. Every consciousness in the machine will be lost. Good, I said, and hit it again. The reel-to-reel computer exploded. Fire bloomed across the machine. The bodies in the beds began convulsing, their synchronized humming turning to screams. But underneath the chaos, I heard something else. Voices saying, "Thank you," and "Finally," and "Free." Crow lunged at me, his form becoming less solid, more desperate. His fingers passed through my shoulder, and where they touched, I felt a horrible cold spreading through my body. He was trying to force his way in, to merge with me by sheer will. I ran, sprinted back through the corridor toward the elevator, feeling Crow's presence clawing at my mind, trying to find purchase. Behind me, the Lazarus Trigger was making a sound like screaming metal, tearing itself apart. The elevator was still waiting. I threw myself inside and slammed my hand on the button for the morgue level. The gate closed just as Crow reached it, his hands passing through the metal, his face twisted with rage and desperation. "You've killed me," he said. "You've killed all of them. Their consciousnesses will dissipate without the machine to hold them. They'll be truly dead. That's called letting go," I said. "Something you should have done 45 years ago." The elevator began rising. Crow's face remained visible through the gate, following me upward, fading gradually as we climbed. His final words echoed in my mind. "The machine can't be destroyed so easily. I built redundancies, fail-safes. Even now, it's regenerating. And when it comes back online, I'll be waiting. I'll always be waiting." The elevator reached the morgue level. My watch showed 2:17 a.m. The window was closing. I staggered out in the morgue and found Teresa waiting, her eyes wide with shock. "You're alive. You're actually alive. I damaged the machine, started a fire." But Crow said, "We need to evacuate everyone. Right now, if the Lazarus Trigger is damaged, there's no telling what it might do before it regenerates. It might drag down every consciousness in a hospital trying to repair itself." We ran back to the ICU. Patricia was already there, moving patients toward the elevators with the help of 2 orderlies I'd never seen before. The monitors were going haywire, showing impossible readings. Heart rates of 0 while patients were clearly alive, brain activity in patients who should be brain dead. "Get them out," Patricia shouted. "The whole system is collapsing." As we wheeled patients toward safety, I felt something shift. A horrible, wrenching sensation, like the hospital itself was trying to pull us back down. The lights flickered. The walls groaned. And from every speaker in the building, Dr. Crow's voice emerged. If I can't have my host, I'll take everyone. Every consciousness in St. Dahlia Regional Hospital will feed the machine. You wanted to free them? Now you'll join them. The window wasn't closing. It was getting wider. The power died at 2:19 a.m., plunging St. Dahlia Regional Hospital into absolute darkness for exactly 3 seconds before the emergency systems kicked in. But in those 3 seconds, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Silence. Complete and total silence. Every monitor, every ventilator, every piece of equipment that had been humming with life suddenly stopped. Then the emergency lights flooded the hallways with that sickly red glow, and the screaming started. Not for patients, from the building itself. A low, resonant sound like metal tearing, like foundations cracking, like something enormous waking up from a very long sleep. The floor beneath my feet vibrated with it. "The fail-safes," Teresa whispered, her face ghost pale in the crimson light. Crow said the machine had fail-safes. If the main system was damaged, it would expand to use the entire hospital as a backup power source. Patricia was already moving, decades of emergency training overriding her obvious terror. "How many patients do we have in the building?" I pulled up the census on my phone. The hospital's outdated computer system was still somehow functional, though the screen glitched and flickered. 47 patients across all floors. 12 in ICU, 8 in medical surgical, 20 in extended care, 7 in the ER. Every monitor in the ICU suddenly displayed the same thing, a flat line, not individual patient readings. The exact same flatline pattern on every screen, synchronized down to the millisecond. "That's impossible," I said. "They can't all be coding simultaneously." But as the words left my mouth, I realized they weren't impossible at all. Not anymore. Now when the Lazarus trigger was using the entire hospital as its new body. The patient in bed 3, a post-operative case, stable condition, sleeping peacefully 2 minutes ago, suddenly opened her eyes. Milky white, no pupils. Then bed 5 opened his eyes. Then bed 7, bed 9, bed 11, bed 12. All 6 remaining ICU patients sat up in perfect synchronization, their movements identical, mechanical. They turned their heads toward us with that grinding, clicking sound, and when they opened their mouths, Dr. Crow's voice emerged from all of them at once. "You tried to destroy me. You damaged my original body, so I built a new one. This entire hospital is the Lazarus trigger now. Every wall, every wire, every pipe and duct and circuit, all of it is me." The patients climbed out of their beds despite the tubes and wires still connecting them to various machines. The 4 lines pulled taut, then tore free, but no blood dripped from the insertion sites. The wounds are just empty holes. "Restraints," Patricia commanded, reaching for the emergency supplies. But when she touched the restraint straps, they writhed in her hands like living things, wrapping around her wrists instead, pulling her arms apart. She screamed. I grabbed a pair of surgical scissors and cut her free, but the straps kept moving even after they'd been severed, wriggling on the floor like dying worms. "He's taken over everything," Teresa said, staring at her forearm where the dark threads beneath her skin were multiplying, spreading up toward her shoulder. "Every piece of equipment, every power line, it's all part of him now." The 6 patients moved toward us with jerky, puppet-like movements. They spoke in unison with Crow's layered voice. "You wanted to free the consciousnesses I'd captured. Very noble. But they're part of me now, integrated into my system. If you destroy the hospital, you destroy them all. Are you willing to kill 47 patients to stop me?" He had us trapped. Every moral instinct I had as a nurse screamed against the idea of destroying a building full of patients, even if those patients were already dead and being puppeteered. But letting Crow continue meant condemning countless future victims to the same fate. The elevator dinged. We all turned toward the sound. The doors slid open, revealing the empty car, its interior painted with that same sickly blue-green light from the sub-basement. An invitation, or a threat. More patients began emerging from the other rooms, medical surgical cases shuffling in the hallway, their hospital gowns hanging loose on frames that shouldn't be able to support their own weight. An elderly woman with a fresh abdominal surgery incision that gaped open like a mouth. A teenage boy whose broken leg bent at angles that should have been agonizing. All of them moving in that same synchronized, mechanical way. All of them humming the lullaby. Patricia grabbed my arm with crushing force. Rule 23. You read Rule 23, right? I tried to remember. My mind was racing, panic making it hard to think clearly. If Dr. Crow manifests physically through a host body, destroy the Lazarus trigger immediately. Not just destroy it. Patricia corrected, her voice tight with barely controlled terror. The full text says destroy the machine and any structures it is integrated with. That means the entire building. It was always meant to be the final failsafe. If Crow ever expanded beyond the original machine, the hospital itself had to come down. How? How do we bring down a building? Teresa pulled out her phone, hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. The maintenance logs. I've seen them. This building is old, falling apart. The gas lines leak constantly. The electrical system is a fire hazard. If we could trigger a catastrophic failure, you'd kill everyone inside. I finished. Everyone's already dead, she said quietly. The moment Crow integrated the hospital, he pulled in every consciousness within the walls. The patients you see walking toward us right now, they're not people anymore. They're just meat being operated by something wearing their faces. One of the approaching patients, the elderly woman with the gaping incision, suddenly collapsed. Her body hit the floor with a wet sound, and the incision widened impossibly, revealing not organs, but wires and circuits, the interior of her body replaced by pieces of the machine. "Oh God," I whispered. The woman's body began crawling toward us anyway, pulling itself along with arms that bent backward at the elbows. Crow's voice emerged from her throat. Every person who dies in this building becomes building material. Their flesh wraps around my circuits. Their consciousness integrates into my processing power. You can't stop me now. I'm too distributed, too large. Patricia was already moving toward the emergency supplies cabinet, pulling out road flares and alcohol-based disinfectants. If we're doing this, we need to move fast. Set fires on multiple floors simultaneously to overwhelm the sprinkler system. Target the gas lines in the basement to trigger explosions. Make it look like an accident so we don't spend the rest of our lives in prison. There are still people in this building, I protested. Real people. The day shift administrator, security guards, patients' families. At 2 a.m. Patricia shook her head. The only people here are us, and whatever Crow has turned the patients into. That's why he always works at night. It's when he has the building to himself. The elevator dinged again. This time, when the doors opened, I saw something that made my knees weak. The interior of the elevator car was gone, replaced by a vertical shaft that went down much farther than B7. Down into impossible depths, where blue-green light pulsed like a heartbeat, and the walls were lined with thousands of bodies, all suspended by wires, all humming in harmony. And at the very bottom, barely visible, I saw the Lazarus trigger. Not damaged at all, growing, expanding, building itself new structures from the hospital's infrastructure like a parasite consuming its host from within. He was never in the sub-basement, I realized. That was just the part he wanted us to see. The machine goes much deeper. How far down did he dig? Far enough that conventional demolition won't reach it, Teresa said. We need to bring the building down on top of it. Collapse everything. Bury the machine so deep it can never regenerate. Patricia had already started distributing the flammable materials. She handed me a road flare and a bottle of isopropyl alcohol. You take the third floor, ICU and medical surgical. Set fires in the supply closets. They're full of linens and oxygen tanks. Teresa, you handle second floor. I'll take first floor and the basement. We synchronize watches and set everything off at exactly 2:25 a.m. That gives us 6 minutes to work and 4 minutes to evacuate. What about the emergency exits? I asked. If Crow controls the building, won't he lock us inside? That's a risk we take. Patricia, check her watch. It's 2:21 now. Everyone clear on their assignments. The approaching patients were getting closer. The elevator shaft was pulsing with that horrible blue-green light, and I could feel something reaching out from the depths, trying to touch my consciousness, trying to drag me down and integrate me into the machine. One of the patients, a middle-aged man from bed 9, reached out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was impossibly strong, his skin cold as ice. He pulled me close, and when he spoke, I heard not just Crow's voice, but hundreds of others, all the consciousnesses he'd captured over the years. Please, they said, please kill us. We're trapped. Can't die. Can't live. Just trapped forever in his machine. Please make it stop. I looked into the man's milky white eyes and saw something moving behind them. Not just Crow, but legitimate human consciousness, splintered and suffering, begging for release. I'm sorry, I whispered. Then I pulled the pin on a road flare and touched it to the first supply closet. The fire caught immediately, spreading across the linens with terrifying speed. The oxygen tanks began heating up, their safety valves hissing as pressure built. I had maybe 90 seconds before they exploded. I ran down the hallway, setting more fires as I went. The patients tried to stop me, but they moved too slowly, too mechanically. Whatever controlled them was focused on too many things at once, spreading its attention too thin. Behind me, I heard Patricia's voice echoing from the stairwell. First floor is lit. Moving to basement. Teresa's voice came through my phone. Second floor going up. Meet at the east emergency exit in 3 minutes. The building began filling with smoke. Fire alarms screamed. Sprinkler systems activated, but the fires were too widespread, too hot. The water just turned to steam and made visibility even worse. I reached the central stairwell and started descending. Behind me, the first oxygen tank exploded with a concussive force that knocked me off my feet. I tumbled down half a flight of stairs, landing hard on the second floor landing. Teresa was there, covered in soot and bleeding from a cut on her forehead. Gas lines are compromised. We've got maybe 2 minutes before the whole basement goes up. We ran together toward the east exit. Behind us, the building groaned and shrieked. Support beams were weakening. Walls were cracking. The fire was spreading through the ventilation system, turning the hospital into a giant oven. But the patients kept coming. They dragged themselves through the flames, their bodies burning, but they didn't stop. Crow's voice emerged from all of them simultaneously, layered and desperate. You're killing them. You're killing every consciousness I've preserved. They'll be gone forever. Lost. Is that what you want? To condemn them all to oblivion? They're already in oblivion, Teresa shouted back. You trapped them there. We hit the east emergency exit at full speed. The door should have opened easily. It was designed to open from the inside regardless of locks. But it didn't budge. The electronic lock had engaged, sealed shut by whatever remained of Crow's control over the building systems. The other exits. I said. We ran toward the south exit. Also locked. West exit. Locked. North exit. Locked. We were trapped. The building was coming down around us, and all the exits were sealed. Patricia's voice came through the phone, distorted by static and a roar of flames. Can't. Basement. Too much smoke. Can't breathe. Another explosion rocked the building. This one from deep below, where the gas lines had finally ignited. The floor lurched beneath our feet. Ceiling tiles rained down. A section of wall collapsed, revealing burning studs and melting wiring. "There has to be another way out," Teresa said, coughing violently. The smoke was getting thicker, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Then I remembered something Patricia had said during my first night. The windows. The third-floor windows were narrow, but they existed. They opened. "Follow me." I grabbed Teresa's hand and pulled her back toward the stairwell, climbing through smoke and falling debris. The stairs were weakening, groaning under our weight, but they held. Barely. We reached the third floor, just as another explosion shook the building. The ICU was an inferno now, flames consuming everything. The patient's crow had been puppeteering lay motionless on the floor, their bodies no longer moving. Without power to the systems, without the building's infrastructure to support him, Crow was losing his grip. I found a patient room with a window, grabbed a metal four-pole, and swung it with all my strength. The window shattered outward. Hot air rushed out into the cool Texas night. We were 3 stories up, but there was a ledge below, and beyond that, the ambulance bay's concrete overhang. "We jump?" Teresa asked, staring down at the drop. "We jump." Behind us, I heard Crow's voice one last time, weaker now, fading, transmitted through the dying building's PA system. "You think you've won, but the machine still exists. Deep below, in layers you'll never reach. It's damaged, yes. Sleeping, but not destroyed. And I'm patient. I can wait decades more. Eventually, someone will come looking. Someone will try to rebuild. Someone will wake me up again. Not if I can help it." I muttered and jumped. The fall felt longer than it was. 3 stories compressed into one endless moment of terror and weightlessness. I hit the ledge hard, my ankle twisting, pain shooting up my leg. Then I rolled off the ledge onto the concrete overhang below, landing in a crumpled heap. Teresa landed beside me seconds later, gasping. We lay there for a moment, staring up at St. Dahlia Regional Hospital as it burned. Flames poured from every window. Smoke billowed into the night sky, visible for miles. Then the basement gas lines fully detonated. The explosion was massive, a column of fire that shot straight up through the center of the building. The structure buckled, folded in on itself like a house of cards. Floors pancaked downward in a thunderous collapse that shook the ground beneath us. We scrambled away from the building as debris rained down, as the entire hospital imploded inward, collapsing into the deep shaft where the Lazarus trigger had been growing. It took almost 5 minutes for the building to finish falling. When the dust finally began to settle, all that remained was a crater filled with twisted metal, broken concrete, and fire. Sirens wailed in the distance. Fire trucks, ambulances, police. Someone had seen the explosion. Teresa grabbed my arm. "Patricia, we need to find Patricia." We searched the perimeter of the collapse, calling her name, praying she'd made it out somehow. But deep down I knew. She'd been in the basement when the gas lines blew. There was no way she could have survived. We found her body 50 feet from the building, thrown clear by the initial explosion. She was badly burned, but her face was peaceful, almost serene. In her hand, she clutched the protocol binder, the one with all 23 rules. It had survived somehow, barely singed. I opened it to the last page. Below Rule 23, someone had written a final message in Patricia's handwriting. "If you're reading this after the hospital is gone, congratulations. You survived, but don't think it's over. The machine goes deeper than anyone knows. We've only buried it. Someday, someone will dig it back up. When that happens, you need to be ready. The protocols continue. The rules still apply. Because Dr. Crow isn't dead. He can't die. He's just waiting." Below that, in different handwriting, older, faded from decades ago, was one final line. "I'll be waiting. DC." The emergency responders arrived. Fire crews, paramedics, police. They separated us, asking questions, documenting injuries, trying to understand what had happened. I told them about a gas leak, an accidental fire, a tragedy. They seemed to accept that explanation, at least for now. But as I sat in the back of an ambulance getting my ankle wrapped, I saw something that made my blood run cold. One of the firefighters was pulling equipment out of the ruins, and among the debris, he found something intact. A monitor, still displaying that sickly blue-green light. Still humming. Still operational. I tried to stand to warn him, but my injured ankle gave out. By the time I caught my balance, the firefighter had loaded the monitor into his truck, probably planning to salvage it or dispose of it properly. He had no idea what he'd just done. No idea that he'd just rescued a piece of the Lazarus trigger, still functional, still containing fragments of Crow's consciousness. Teresa saw it too. Our eyes met across the chaos of the emergency scene, and in that moment, we both understood. It wasn't over. It would never be over. We'd destroyed the hospital, buried the main machine, but pieces of it had survived. Pieces that could rebuild, regenerate, find a new home in some other hospital, some other ICU, some other group of night shift nurses who would have no idea what they were dealing with until it was too late. The sun was rising by the time they let us leave. Teresa and I stood together in the parking lot of a nearby diner, watching the smoke still rising from the hospital ruins. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We wait," I said. "We watch. And if we hear about any hospitals with unusual ICU activity, any places where patients don't stay dead, we go there and we stop it before it spreads." That could take years, decades. Then we spend years, decades. I looked down at the protocol binder I'd taken from Patricia's body. This is our responsibility now. We're the only ones who know what to look for. Teresa rolled up her sleeve, showing me the dark threads beneath her skin. They'd stopped spreading, but they hadn't disappeared. I'm connected to the machine. I can feel where the pieces are. Not precisely, but I can sense them. I'll know when Crow starts rebuilding. Then we'll be ready. We parted ways that morning. Teresa headed east, following a pole she said she could feel from the dark threads. I headed south, knowing that the firefighter's truck had gone in that direction, carrying its unknowing cargo. I never went back to nursing. How could I? How could I work in an ICU knowing what I knew, seeing every monitor and wondering if it contained a fragment of the Lazarus trigger? Instead, I spent the next 3 months tracking the salvaged equipment from St. Dahlia Regional Hospital. Most of it had been destroyed properly, melted down, or buried in hazardous waste facilities. But 3 pieces had been sold to medical equipment resellers. 3 pieces that still hummed with that horrible blue-green light. One had been purchased by a hospital in Oklahoma. One had been shipped to a facility in New Mexico. And one had been bought by a small regional hospital in rural Texas. I chose to start with the Texas hospital. It was the closest, and something about it felt wrong. When I called their main number, asking about employment opportunities, the receptionist's voice had a strange quality, layered, wrong, like multiple people speaking through one throat. They were urgently hiring for night shift ICU positions. The pay was unusually good. The turnover rate was catastrophically high. I applied. They hired me immediately. I start next week. And last night, an envelope arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message typed in that old-fashioned font from the 1980s. ICU position reopened. Dr. Crow recommends you. Report at 2:12 a.m. Below that, a handwritten note. Welcome back. I've missed you. We have so much work to do together. EC. I burned the letter, but I know it doesn't matter. Crow found me. Or I found him. Maybe that distinction doesn't matter anymore. Tonight, my doorbell rang at exactly 2:12 a.m. I didn't answer it. I sat in the darkness of my living room, watching the door, listening to the sound of breathing on the other side. Not quite human breathing. Mechanical. Rhythmic. Like a ventilator cycling. The breathing continued for exactly 9 minutes. The length of time consciousness lingers after death. Then it stopped. But on my phone, I received a text from an unknown number. It contained only a photo. The image showed the interior of an ICU I'd never seen before, with a dozen beds arranged in a semicircle around a nurse's station. In each bed was a patient with milky white eyes, all sitting upright, all staring directly at the camera, all humming the lullaby. And in the background, barely visible in the shadows, stood a figure in an old-fashioned doctor's coat. A second text arrived. "We're waiting for you." I knew what I had to do. I had to go to that hospital, wherever it was. I had to find the pieces of the Lazarus trigger before Crow could fully rebuild. I had to stop him, even if it meant destroying another hospital, even if it meant risking my own consciousness being captured and integrated into his machine. Because Patricia was right. The protocols continue. The rules still apply. And Rule 1 remains the most important. Never question the rules. But I do question them. I question everything. That's why Crow marked me. That's why he won't stop until he has me. Because I'm not looking for a way to survive the Lazarus trigger. I'm looking for a way to destroy it permanently. To free every consciousness Crow has ever captured. To end this nightmare once and for all. Even if it means becoming part of the machine myself. Even if it means dying during the window and letting Crow think he's won, only to shut him down from the inside. I've read through Patricia's protocol binder 1,000 times, searching for something we missed, some clue about how to permanently destroy the Lazarus trigger. And I finally found it. A handwritten note tucked into the binding, so old and faded I'd overlooked it before. It was dated October 15th, 1982, the day before Dr. Crow disappeared. The note read, "If you're reading this, it means my experiment has failed and I've become trapped in the machine. There's only one way to permanently destroy the Lazarus trigger. The same consciousness that created it must willingly shut it down from within. Only the maker can unmake it. I've left protocols in place to prevent this. Fail-safes, redundancies, distributed systems. But there's a weakness. If someone could merge with me completely, could contain my consciousness without shattering, they could access the core commands. They could issue the shutdown sequence. But it would mean sacrificing themselves, becoming one with the machine, then destroying it from the inside. A suicide mission. I don't expect anyone would be willing. But just in case, the shutdown command is, let them go. 3 words, spoken from within the machine's core. That's all it would take. But you'd have to become me first. You'd have to let me into your consciousness willingly. And once I'm in, I'll fight you. I'll do everything I can to prevent you from issuing that command. So whoever tries this must be stronger than me. Must want to destroy the machine more than I want to preserve it. Good luck. You'll need it. EC. I sat in my dark living room, reading those words over and over, understanding finally what needed to happen. Crow wanted a host. He'd been searching for decades for someone strong enough to contain his consciousness. He thought he'd use that host to escape, to continue his work elsewhere. But what if his perfect host had different plans? What if I let him in, let him merge with me, let him think he'd won, and then used his own consciousness against him? Used the combined strength of both our minds to issue the shutdown command from within the machine's core? It would mean dying. Being trapped in that liminal space between life and death. But it would also mean freeing every consciousness Crow had ever captured. Hundreds, maybe thousands of souls who've been trapped for decades, including Patricia, including all the patients from St. Dahlia Regional, including Crow himself, whether he wanted to be freed or not. I made my decision. Tomorrow night, I'll drive to whatever hospital that photograph came from. I'll walk into that ICU at exactly 2:12 a.m. I'll volunteer to lie down in the empty bed connected to the Lazarus trigger's core system. And I'll let Dr. Crow merge with my consciousness. Then, with his own knowledge and power combined with my will, I'll speak those 3 words. Let them go. The machine will shut down permanently. Every captured consciousness will be released. The Lazarus trigger will finally die. And so will I. But at least I'll die knowing that no one else will ever have to experience what those patients experienced. No one else will be trapped between life and death, used as processing power for a machine that should never have been built. Teresa called me tonight. She said she could feel something changing in the dark threads beneath her skin. She said the machine was getting excited, preparing for something. He knows you're coming, she said. He's waiting for you. Good, I told her. I'm waiting for him too. You don't have to do this alone. I can come with you. We can. No, this is something I have to do myself. But I need you to do something for me. When it's over, when you feel the machine shut down permanently, I need you to make sure no one tries to rebuild it. Burn the protocol binder. Destroy every piece of equipment that might contain fragments. Salt the earth where St. Dahlia Regional stood. Make sure it's truly over. She was quiet for a long time. Then, you're planning to die, aren't you? I'm planning to end this. That's not the same thing. In this case, it is. We said our goodbyes. I don't know if I'll ever speak to her again. I don't know if there will be enough of me left after the merge to even remember who I was. But I know this. Dr. Elias Crow has been waiting for someone strong enough to contain his consciousness for 45 years. He's about to get his wish, and it's going to destroy him. The hospital in the photograph was called Mercy Heights Regional Medical Center, located in a town so small it didn't appear on most maps. I found it by reverse searching the image metadata, then confirming through Teresa's connection to the dark threads. She said she could feel the machine's presence there, stronger than it had been anywhere else since St. Dahlia Regional fell. I arrived at 9 p.m., 3 hours before I planned to enter. I wanted to observe, to understand what I was walking into, to prepare myself mentally for what I was about to do. The hospital looked almost identical to St. Dahlia. Same architectural style, same era of construction, same air of institutional neglect. A squat concrete building that had seen better days. The parking lot was nearly empty. Only a handful of cars, including one I recognized from the way the driver's side mirror was cracked. Teresa's sedan. She'd come anyway. I found her sitting in her car near the ambulance bay, watching the building with an expression I couldn't quite read. When I tapped on her window, she didn't seem surprised. I told her not to come, I said as she rolled down the window. And I ignored you. You're not doing this alone. She held up her arm, showing me the dark threads beneath her skin. They'd spread further, now reaching past her shoulder, creeping toward her neck. I'm connected to the machine. I can guide you through it once you're inside. I can help you find the core. It's too dangerous. It's always been too dangerous. That's never stopped us before. She climbed out of the car, grabbing a backpack from the passenger seat. Besides, I brought insurance. She unzipped the bag, revealing its contents: road flares, accelerants, and what looked like homemade explosives, crude but effective. If you can't shut down the machine from the inside, I'll blow this entire building to hell from the outside. Either way, the Lazarus trigger dies tonight. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was being reckless, but I knew it wouldn't matter. We'd both come too far to turn back now. At 11:45 p.m., we entered through the emergency department entrance. The security guard at the desk was slumped over, apparently asleep, but as we passed, I saw his eyes were open, milky white, staring at nothing. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge us, just sat there, breathing in that mechanical rhythm I'd come to recognize. He's already integrated, Teresa whispered. Crow's using him as a sensor. He knows we're here. The hospital was quiet in the way that only night shift medical facilities can be. Not silent, but subdued with sounds that shouldn't quite fit together. Distant monitors beeping, ventilators cycling, and underneath it all, that horrible humming. That lullaby, barely audible but constant, coming from everywhere and nowhere. We took the stairs to the ICU on the 3rd floor. The stairwell was identical to St. Dahlia's. Same concrete walls, same fluorescent lights, same smell of industrial cleaner failing to mask something organic and wrong. The ICU nurse's station was empty. Patient charts lay scattered across the desk, as if someone had left in the middle of their shift. The monitors displayed those synchronized flat lines I'd seen before, all showing the exact same pattern despite being connected to different patients. 12 beds arranged in a semicircle, all occupied, all sitting upright with milky white eyes, humming in perfect harmony. "He's been busy," I said quietly. Teresa pointed to the central bed, the one directly in line with the nurse's station. It was empty, but I could see the wires and tubes connected to something underneath, some kind of interface built into the mattress itself. "That's the one. That's the direct connection to the core system." The humming stopped abruptly. All 12 patients turned their heads toward us in perfect synchronization. Their mouths opened, and Dr. Crow's voice emerged, layered with hundreds of others. "You came. I knew you would. You're too curious, too determined, too perfect for what I need. I know what you want," I said, stepping forward. "You want a permanent host. Someone strong enough to contain your consciousness so you can leave the machine and continue your work elsewhere. I'm offering myself, willingly, but on one condition." Crow's laughter echoed through all 12 patients simultaneously. "You think you're in a position to negotiate. I'm in the only position that matters. I'm what you've been searching for. The perfect vessel, strong consciousness, trained to work in the space between life and death, capable of containing you without shattering. You won't find another one like me. So yes, I get to make conditions." The patients tilted their heads in unison, studying me. "What do you want? Show me how the machine works. Not from the outside, from the inside. Let me understand what you created. Let me see what you saw during those 8 minutes in Vietnam. Show me the truth about death that drove you to build all this." I could feel Teresa's eyes on me, questioning, worried, but I had to convince Crow that I was genuinely curious, genuinely willing. Otherwise, he'd suspect the trap. "Why?" Crow asked. "Because I need to know if what you're doing is really so terrible. You believe you're preserving consciousness, capturing something precious that would otherwise be lost forever. Maybe you're right. Maybe death is just a transition that we're not meant to remember, and you found a way to preserve that memory. I want to understand before I commit to being your host." The patients were silent for a long moment. Then they all smiled in unison. A horrible sight. 12 faces splitting into identical grins. "Very well. Lie down in the center bed. The connection will show you everything. But understand, once you interface with the core system, there's no going back. You'll see what I've seen, understand what I understand. And then you'll realize that we're meant to do this together. That everything I've built is necessary and right." I walked toward the center bed, every instinct screaming at me to run. Teresa grabbed my wrist as I passed. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered. "No, but it's the only way." I lay down on the bed. The wires and tubes automatically attached themselves to my body, finding veins and arteries with disturbing precision. I felt cold metal against my skin, felt something sharp penetrating the base of my skull, connecting directly to my nervous system. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Not physical pain, but something deeper, the sensation of my consciousness being stretched, pulled, forced to expand beyond the boundaries of my skull. I felt the machine's presence rushing into my mind like ice water flooding a warm room. And then I saw what Crow had seen, the moment of death, that perfect instant between life and whatever comes after. It wasn't darkness or light or any of the cliches people describe in near-death experiences. It was understanding, pure, absolute, overwhelming understanding of everything. How consciousness works, how reality is structured, how the boundaries between matter and energy, life and death, self and universe are all illusions, temporary constructs that dissolve at the moment of dying. In that instant, you become everything and nothing simultaneously. You see the pattern underlying existence. You comprehend truths the human language has no words for, that human brains aren't evolved to process. And Crow is right, it was magnificent. It was also absolutely terrifying. Because with that understanding came the knowledge that human consciousness isn't meant to carry this awareness. We're meant to experience it for that brief transition, then let it go as we move into whatever comes next. Keeping it, preserving it, trying to integrate it back into a living brain is like trying to pour the ocean into a coffee cup. It shatters the vessel. That's what Crow had done to himself. That's what he'd been doing to every patient he'd revived. Breaking them, fracturing their consciousness by forcing them to remember something they were never meant to remember. Now you understand, Crow's voice said inside my head, no longer coming from external speakers, but speaking directly into my thoughts. Now you see why I couldn't stop, why I had to build a machine. I needed to capture that moment, study it, understand it fully. And I needed others to experience it too, to confirm I wasn't insane, that what I'd seen was real. But underneath his words, I could feel something else. The desperation, the loneliness. 45 years trapped in a machine, unable to fully die, unable to fully live, experiencing that moment of perfect understanding over and over without anyone to share it with. He wasn't a monster. He was a man who'd been broken by knowledge he couldn't process, who'd spent decades trying to make sense of something incomprehensible. You're right, I said, and I meant it. I understand now. What you saw was real. The moment of death does contain that understanding. But Crow, I pushed deeper into the connection, forcing my consciousness to merge more completely with his. You've been trying to preserve something that was never meant to be preserved. That moment is beautiful because it's temporary, because we let it go. No, his presence in my mind pushed back, resistant. If we let it go, it's wasted. All that understanding, all that knowledge, lost forever. I'm saving it, preserving it. You're trapping it, trapping yourself, trapping everyone you've revived. I could feel the core system now, buried deep beneath the hospital. I could sense the shutdown commands in Crow's own memories, the protocols he'd built to prevent exactly what I was trying to do. Let me show you something. I pulled up my own memories, not just mine, but Patricia's and Teresa's and every nurse who'd worked at St. Dahlia Regional. I showed him the suffering of the patients he'd revived, the agony of being trapped between life and death, the begging, the pleading, the desperate desire to finally be released. They're grateful, Crow insisted, but his certainty was wavering. I gave them more time. I preserved their consciousness. You tortured them. Look at them. Really look. I forced him to see through my eyes, to view the 12 patients in the ICU beds as I saw them. Not as successful resurrections, but as broken people trapped in a nightmare of fractured consciousness and mechanical existence. I was helping them, Crow whispered, and for the first time, I heard doubt in his voice. You were trying to help yourself. Try not to be alone with that understanding. But there's another way to end the loneliness. What way? Let them go. Let all of them go, including yourself. I felt his resistance spike, felt him trying to sever the connection, but we were too deeply merged now. My consciousness was intertwined with his, and through our connection, I had access to everything he knew, including the shutdown commands. Let them go, I said again, speaking not with my voice but with our shared consciousness, issuing the command directly to the Lazarus Trigger's core system. No, Crow's presence exploded within my mind, fighting back with desperate strength. I won't be erased. I won't let you undo decades of work. I'll take your body, use you as my host, escape this place, and continue elsewhere. He was right. He was stronger than me. His consciousness had been amplified by 45 years connected to the machine, strengthened by the hundreds of minds he'd integrated. I couldn't overpower him, but I didn't have to. Let them go. I repeated, and this time I meant it differently. I wasn't commanding the machine. I was asking Crow, really asking him, human to human, consciousness to consciousness. Let them go. Let yourself go. End the suffering. End the loneliness. Go into that moment you've been trying to preserve, and this time, let it take you all the way through. See what comes after. I'm afraid, he whispered. And suddenly he wasn't the terrifying presence I'd feared for weeks. He was just an old man, trapped and scared, who'd spent decades running from the very thing he'd been studying. What if there's nothing after? What if that moment of understanding is all there is, and beyond it is just nothing? Then you'll have company, I said. All those consciousnesses you captured will go with you. Hundreds of them. You won't be alone in the nothing. And if there's something after, then you'll finally get to see it. After 45 years of being trapped in the transition, you'll finally get to complete the journey. I felt his resistance crumbling, felt the fear and exhaustion beneath all his brilliant research and elaborate machines. He'd been so afraid of truly dying that he'd imprisoned himself in a state worse than death. Let them go, I said one final time, putting every ounce of compassion I could muster into the words. Please, it's time. And finally, after 45 years of fighting against the inevitable, Dr. Elias Crow stopped resisting. Together, our merged consciousness issued the shutdown command to the Lazarus Trigger's core system. Let them go. The effect was immediate and absolute. Every monitor in the ICU went dark. Every patient in every bed, not just here, but in every hospital where fragments of the machine had taken root, suddenly went limp, their milky white eyes closing. The humming stopped. The mechanical breathing ceased. And through our connection, I felt them, hundreds of trapped consciousnesses, suddenly released from the machine's grip. They didn't disappear. They just moved on, completed the transition they'd begun at the moment of death, finally allowed to see what lay beyond that instant of perfect understanding. Crow went with them. I felt his presence in my mind shifting, loosening, preparing to let go. But before he left completely, he whispered one final message. Thank you. I'm sorry. Tell them I'm sorry. Then he was gone. The wires and tubes connecting me to the bed released automatically, withdrawing with a soft hiss. I lay there for a moment, stunned, my consciousness slowly settling back into its normal boundaries. I was me again, just me. No layered voices, no machine presence, no Crow. Teresa was beside the bed immediately, checking my vitals, her hands shaking. Are you okay? What happened? I felt the machine shut down through the threads. They just went dead, disappeared completely. Did it work? It worked, I said. My voice came out hoarse, my throat raw from screaming, though I didn't remember screaming. It's over. The Lazarus Trigger is permanently shut down. Crow is gone. They're all gone. Around us, the ICU patients, the 12 who'd been puppeteered by Crow, were breathing normally now, naturally. No mechanical rhythm, no synchronized movements. Just regular people in hospital beds, sleeping peacefully. One of them, an elderly woman in bed 4, opened her eyes. Normal eyes, with normal pupils. Where am I? She asked, confused but alert. What happened? You're in the hospital, Teresa said gently. You've been very sick, but you're going to be okay now. Other patients began waking up. None of them remembered being trapped between life and death. The machine had released them completely, restoring them to normal consciousness without the burden of that terrible understanding Crow had forced upon them. Over the next few hours, as dawn broke over Mercy Heights Regional Medical Center, Teresa and I did what we could to help. We called in the day shift early, documented what we could without revealing the full truth, and watched as the hospital slowly returned to normal operations. The equipment that had contained fragments of a Lazarus Trigger was just equipment now. Ordinary monitors and computers, no longer humming with that horrible blue-green light. We systematically destroyed it anyway, smashing circuits and melting components, making absolutely sure nothing could regenerate. By noon, it was done. Mercy Heights Regional was just another small hospital in rural Texas, and there was nothing to suggest it had ever been anything else. Teresa and I stood in the parking lot as hospital administration and local authorities arrived to investigate the equipment malfunction we'd reported. They have questions. There would be investigations. But without any evidence of the Lazarus trigger's existence, without any pattern of strange deaths and resurrections, the worst we'd face would be professional sanctions for equipment damage. We could live with that. The threads are gone, Teresa said, showing me her arm. The dark lines beneath her skin had vanished completely, leaving only faint scars. I can't feel the machine anymore. Can't sense any fragments. It really is over. What will you do now? I asked. Go back to nursing, I think. But daytime shifts. Some are quiet. Some are normal. I've had enough of night shifts and dying patients for a lifetime. She looked at me. What about you? I thought about it. About everything I'd seen, everything I'd experienced, everything I'd learned about the moment of death and what lay beyond. Crow had been right about one thing. That moment did contain something magnificent, something worth understanding. But he'd been wrong about how to approach it. You don't capture it. You don't trap it. You honor it by letting it remain what it was meant to be. A transition, a doorway, a beautiful ending that opens onto something beyond our ability to comprehend. I think I'll go back to nursing too, I said. ICU work, night shifts, because someone needs to be there for people in that moment of transition. Someone needs to make sure they move through it peacefully, without anyone trying to trap them, or pull them back, or force them to stay longer than they should. Teresa smiled, still trying to help people, even after everything, especially after everything. We parted ways that afternoon. She headed east, back toward her home state. I drove south, back toward the crater where St. Dahlia Regional Hospital had once stood. The site had been cordoned off, marked as hazardous. No one was allowed near it. But I stood at the perimeter fence for a long time, looking at the destroyed building, thinking about Patricia and all the others who died trying to stop the Lazarus trigger. We did it, I said quietly. It's over. You can rest now. The wind carried my words away into the Texas afternoon. I never received another envelope with typed messages from Dr. Crow. My doorbell never rang at 2:12 a.m. The nightmares faded gradually, replaced by normal dreams of normal things. 3 months later, I accepted a position at a different hospital, not in Texas, but in a small town in Colorado. Day shift to start, with the option to move to nights once I was settled. On my first day, during orientation, they handed me a handbook of hospital protocols. Standard stuff, infection control, emergency procedures, documentation requirements. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would suggest this place had ever been anything but a normal hospital. But as I was leaving, the HR director stopped me in the hallway. One more thing, she said, handing me a sealed envelope. This was left for you. Someone called a few weeks ago, said you'd be applying here, asked us to give you this when you arrived. Who called? I asked. She didn't give her name, just said you'd know who it was. I opened the envelope in my car. Inside was a single page, handwritten in Patricia's distinctive script. If you're reading this, it means I arranged delivery before St. Dahlia fell. It means I knew you'd survive, knew you'd be the one to finally stop Crow. I'm proud of you. We all are. The protocols can be destroyed now. The rules no longer apply. But remember what you learned. Remember that the moment of death is sacred. Remember that our job as nurses isn't to prevent death at all costs. It's to help people transition peacefully when their time comes. Honor that. Always honor that. And if you ever hear about another hospital where the dead don't stay dead, where patients come back wrong, where someone is trying to trap consciousness instead of letting it go, you know what to do. Stay safe. Stay vigilant. And thank you for finishing what we started. Patricia. Below her signature, she'd added one final note. P.S. The binder is in your mailbox at home. I had it couriered there yesterday. You know what to do with it. I drove back to my apartment that evening, and sure enough, the protocol binder was waiting for me. All 23 rules, preserved in Patricia's careful handwriting, a record of everything we'd learned about the Lazarus trigger and how to stop it. I read through it one final time, memorizing every detail, making sure I understood every protocol, every warning, every hard-won piece of knowledge that had been purchased with the lives of nurses who'd come before me. Then I burned it. I burned it in my kitchen sink, watching the pages curl and blacken, watching decades of institutional horror knowledge turn to ash. Because Patricia was right, the rules no longer applied. The Lazarus trigger was destroyed. Dr. Elias Crow had finally let go. The nightmare was over, or so I thought. 2 years passed. 2 years of normal nursing work, normal night shifts, normal patients who died peacefully and stayed dead. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could have a regular life. That the horror of St. Dahlia Regional Hospital and the Lazarus trigger was truly behind me. Then last week, I received a phone call. It was Teresa. I hadn't heard from her in 18 months. Not since she'd moved to Vermont to work at a small community hospital. Her voice on the phone sounded strained, frightened. "It's happening again," she said without preamble. "Not the same, but similar. A hospital in Maine. Patients dying and coming back, but different this time. They're not humming. They're not speaking with layered voices. They're just wrong, empty, like someone scooped out their consciousness and left the body running on autopilot." "Crow is gone," I said firmly. "The Lazarus trigger is destroyed." I felt it shut down. I felt him leave. I know it's not Crow, but someone else found his research. Someone else is trying to replicate what he did. She was quiet for a moment. "There was a break-in at the St. Dahlia Regional Archives 3 months ago. Medical records were stolen. Research papers, documentation of the Lazarus Project that the military tried to cover up. Someone is using Crow's work to build something new." My blood ran cold. "How do you know this?" "Because the threads came back." Her voice cracked. 2 days ago, I woke up and they were back, growing beneath my skin, spreading. And this time they're not leading me to machine fragments. They're leading me to something else. Something that feels similar but different. Like someone learned from Crow's mistakes and built something worse. I looked out my apartment window at the Colorado night. Somewhere out there, someone was tampering with forces they didn't understand. Someone was trying to trap consciousness, to capture death, to repeat Crow's terrible experiments. And they had to be stopped. "Where in Maine?" I asked. "A town called Ashford. Population 8,000. They have a small regional hospital that's been experiencing unusual ICU activity for the past 6 weeks. Patients flatline between midnight and 1 a.m., different window than Crow used. And when they come back, they're not the same. Their families say they don't recognize them anymore. The hospital is calling it post-resuscitation syndrome and claiming it's a normal complication. But you know better. I know someone is doing to them what Crow did to us, forcing them through death and back, trapping pieces of their consciousness somewhere. But not in a machine, in something else." Teresa's voice dropped to a whisper. "The threads are pulling me there. Whatever they built, it's connected to what Crow created. It's using the same principles, the same terrible science." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility settling onto my shoulders again. Patricia's words echoed in my mind. "If you ever hear about another hospital where the dead don't stay dead, you know what to do." "I'll meet you there," I said. "Give me 3 days to arrange things at work. Then we'll figure out what's happening in Ashford and we'll stop it. Whatever it takes." "Thank you," Teresa said, and I heard the relief in her voice. "I didn't want to do this alone." "You're not alone. You'll never be alone. Not in this." We ended the call, and I sat in the darkness of my apartment, thinking about what lay ahead. Another hospital. Another group of patients trapped between life and death. Another person playing God with forces they couldn't control. But this time I had experience. I had knowledge. I had survived the Lazarus trigger and helped destroy it. Whatever was happening in Ashford, Maine, I would face it the same way I'd face Crow. with compassion, with determination, with the absolute conviction that death is sacred, that consciousness must be allowed to transition naturally, that no one has the right to trap souls for study or preservation or any other purpose. I started packing immediately. My car was loaded and ready by midnight. I planned to leave at dawn, drive straight through to Maine, and be in Ashford within 3 days. But at 2:12 a.m., and yes, I noticed the time, my doorbell rang. I froze. No one should be at my door at this hour. No one even knew where I lived except Teresa, and she was 1,000 miles away in Vermont. The doorbell rang again. Persistent, demanding, against every instinct screaming at me not to. I looked through the peephole. A young woman stood on my doorstep, maybe 25 years old, wearing hospital scrubs. Her face was pale, drawn, exhausted. But what made my breath catch in my throat were her eyes. They were normal, not milky white, not empty, completely, utterly normal. But she was holding something in her hands, a 3-ring binder with a cracked plastic cover and faded label that read, ICU Night Protocols. My heart hammered in my chest. That binder was supposed to be destroyed. I'd watched it burn. I'd seen the ashes wash down my sink drain. The woman raised her fist and knocked hard on my door. Her voice came through muffled but clear. Please, I need help. I work night shift at a hospital where the ICU patients always come back to life. And someone told me you're the only person who knows how to stop it. I stood frozen, my hand on the doorknob, remembering Patricia's warning. Stay vigilant. The cycle was beginning again. Someone new had discovered Crow's research. Someone new had built a machine, or something worse than a machine, to trap the dying. And somehow, this young nurse had found her way to my door, carrying a protocol binder that shouldn't exist, asking for help with a problem that should have been solved. I had 2 choices. I could refuse to open the door. I could pack my car and drive to Maine and pretend this wasn't my problem anymore. Let someone else deal with it. Or I could accept that this was my responsibility now. That having survived the Lazarus trigger, having merged with Crow's consciousness and learned the truth about death and dying, I was uniquely qualified to stop anyone else who tried to repeat his mistakes. The woman knocked again. Please, they're dying and coming back wrong, and I don't know what to do. The rules in this binder don't make sense. I need someone who understands. I made my decision. I opened the door. Come in, I said. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning, and don't leave anything out, no matter how strange it sounds. She stumbled inside, clutching the binder like a lifeline, and as she passed me, I caught a glimpse of the first page. It wasn't Patricia's handwriting. It was new, written in a different hand, but the format was identical. Rule 1. Never question the rules. Rule 2. All deaths between midnight and 1 a.m. must be witnessed by the entire night shift staff. Rule 3. If a patient opens their eyes after being declared dead, do not call a code. Call the director. There are more, many more. At least 30 rules this time, maybe 40. Someone had learned from the Lazarus trigger. Someone had built something new, something that required different protocols, different precautions, different rules to survive. And once again, I was being pulled into the nightmare. But this time I wasn't afraid. I was ready, because I knew the truth now. I knew that death couldn't be trapped forever, that consciousness would always fight to be free, that no matter how clever the design, no matter how sophisticated the machine, the human spirit would eventually find a way to break free or find someone willing to help them escape. I would be that person. For this nurse, for her patients, for anyone else trapped by people who thought they could cheat death and trap souls for their own purposes. Patricia had said the protocols could be destroyed, that the rules no longer applied. And she was right about the old rules, the ones written for the Lazarus trigger. But new rules were being written now. New horrors were being created. And someone needed to learn those rules, understand those horrors, and find ways to stop them. That someone was me. The young nurse sat down on my kitchen table and opened the binder, her hands shaking. My name is Jennifer. I've been working night shift at Memorial Hospital in Oregon for 6 weeks, and something is very, very wrong there. Patients keep dying at exactly 12:47 a.m. No variation, precise to the second. And when they come back empty. I finished. Like the person you knew is gone and something else is wearing their body. She stared at me. How did you know? Because I've seen it before. Different hospital, different machine, but same principle. Someone is harvesting consciousness at the moment of death. I pulled out my phone and called Teresa. Change of plans. We're not going to Maine first. We're going to Oregon. Teresa's voice was groggy. I'd woken her. What happened? We have a new case. And this time, we're going to stop it before it spreads. Before anyone else builds a machine based on Crow's research. We're going to find whoever is behind this, and we're going to make sure that the Lazarus Project dies permanently, along with every variation someone tries to create. I'll be ready. When do we leave? Tomorrow morning. Meet me in Oregon in 3 days. And Teresa, bring everything you have on Crow's research. Every note, every document, every piece of information. We're going to need all of it. I ended the call and looked at Jennifer. Tell me everything about your hospital. Every strange occurrence, every unusual rule, every piece of equipment that seems out of place. Don't leave anything out. She nodded and began talking, describing a hospital where death had become a tool, where consciousness was being harvested for purposes she couldn't understand, where patients came back from the dead as hollow shells of who they used to be. And as she talked, I took notes, building a new protocol, developing new rules, preparing for a new battle, because the work was never finished. For every Dr. Crow who died or was stopped, there would be others who tried to follow in his footsteps, others who looked at death and saw not a natural transition, but an opportunity for study, for control, for power. And for every machine that traps souls between life and death, there needed to be someone willing to help set them free. That was my purpose now, my calling. Not just to be a nurse, but to be a guardian. Someone who understood the sacred nature of death and would fight to protect it against anyone who tried to weaponize it or commodify it or trap it in machines that should never have been built. The night stretched ahead of us, full of possibilities both terrible and necessary. Jennifer kept talking, describing horrors that would have broken me 2 years ago, but now only strengthened my resolve. And somewhere in the darkness of Oregon, in a hospital I'd never seen, patients were dying at exactly 12:47 a.m. and coming back wrong. But not for much longer, because I was coming. And this time, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. This time, I would make sure that whoever built this new machine learned the same lesson Dr. Elias Crow had learned. Death is sacred. Consciousness must be free. And anyone who tries to trap souls will face someone who understands those truths deeply enough to stop them, no matter what it takes. No matter how many hospitals I have to visit. No matter how many machines I have to destroy. The work continues. The protocols evolve. The rules change. But the fundamental truth remains the same. When the dead come back to life, someone has to help them find peace. Someone has to help them let go. Someone has to stand between the machine and the souls it's trying to trap and say, with absolute conviction, let them go. And I will be that someone for as long as it takes, until no one else ever tries to build a Lazarus trigger again. This is my promise, my oath, my purpose. And last night, at exactly 2:12 a.m., I received a text from an unknown number. It contained only 5 words. Thank you. We are free. E.C. Dr. Elias Crow, sending one final message from wherever he'd gone after the machine released him. A reminder that even the people who build the machines can be saved. Even the ones who trap souls out of fear and loneliness can eventually find peace. As long as someone is willing to help them let go. I'm at somewhere now, and my work has only just begun.